Welcome. Our Connect panel is all about bringing people together to share knowledge and support each other on relevant topics to our industry. In our past conversations, we've touched on topics that have been impacted by the coronavirus. And today we're going to talk specifics on returning to the physical workplace. Our experts work with companies in many sectors, so we're going to get a broad perspective on the practical side of returning to work, but we're also will focus on people. Many studies indicate that the top reason people want to return to the office is just that, their coworkers and friends. We've seen a new level of vulnerability shared amongst coworkers, colleagues, and friends during this time. Let's start by introducing our panelists for today's conversation. First, we have Deanne Erpelding. She's a certified interior designer and principal at Nelson with 26 years of experience. Her roles within the firm include Central Region Leader, which oversees the markets of Minneapolis, Chicago, Dallas, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, along with National Practice Leader for Landlord Services. Landlord Services encompasses asset strategy, building repositions, amenity spaces, and tenant projects on behalf of property ownership. We also have Rosalind Zumbrunnen, who is an interior designer with 25 years of project experience. As a designer, Zumbrunnen is well known for her team leadership, commitment to community, and enthusiasm for environmental design. Rosalind is a principal and design director in the Minneapolis office and is an active participant in the design industry and community. She's a member of multiple professional and community organizations, and most notably chaired the nonprofit program Zero Landfill in 2010, helping to redirect nearly 35,000 pounds of architectural product samples from the waste stream to local artists, craftsmen, and art education programs. And Jen Summers, with 25 years of experience in the design industry, Jen brings strong workplace design, project management, and business development expertise to her current role with Hayworth. She enjoys partnering with clients, real estate, and the design community to present Hayworth knowledge resources early on in the design process. She leverages her breadth of knowledge of the entire design process to help guide clients through the furniture process to maximize results. So I'm going to shift over and have our lovely panelists here present themselves. I'm Megan Duffy Sanaconi with Fluid Interiors, creative director there, and I'm really happy to moderate this panel. Thanks everyone for being here today.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. I know you have all had conversations with clients, past and current, to understand how they are doing as this work landscape evolves. I think that's one of the best ways to see where people are at and what they're struggling to work through is to just talk to them. So a lot of what we'll discuss today will highlight those conversations that you've had, but we're also seeing the use of surveys to just gauge where employees are at so that as companies are looking to bring people back to work in the future, they have a sense of their thoughts and feelings as well. So Deanne, you find a lot of clients are surveying staff about returning to work, and if they are, what are they finding?
Absolutely. Definitely taking this opportunity to really seek to understand where everybody's at. And certainly it's varied depending on the industry, the business, the company, amount of employees, their policies and protocols, et cetera. But most certainly there is definitely across a lot of the clients we work with, just about everybody is doing some form of surveying, whether it's in virtual Zoom platforms where it's focus group sessions, an opportunity to listen and learn, or if it's a more formalized electronic survey that either goes out to all of the employees, or in the case of a building or a landlord, they're surveying a lot of the tenants to see where they're coming so they can be better informed on how to navigate all of this. And with the survey results that we have heard, we've even conducted some with our clients, actually help facilitate some of those surveys. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all. It runs the gamut of a lot of variables. However, one thing that remains consistent is sort of this transition and phased approach to reentry for companies. That has been kind of a common thread.
Yeah. I think that's people have figured out that the work from home is working okay for a lot of roles. And so just buying themselves a little bit of time to be safe on that front. So whether people are engaging in surveys, as you mentioned, different methodologies for how to get that information. I'm sure there are some companies that are doing no engagement at all. Roz, what impacts are you seeing that company culture is having on those return to work plans?
Yeah, and you hit on it, Megan. It's why are people going to go back to the office? We've heard Twitter's even saying to their employees, you don't need to go back to the office. We'll reevaluate that. And we've been talking about employee attraction and retention for a long time, but what does this new work-life balance mean when we're almost balancing everything, right? And what's the reason that people are going to go back to the office? And so we were working on a project internally and just kind of reevaluating and trying to identify what the workplace of the future is. We've kind of come to this realization that, you can stay home and we can get work done. So what's the office draw? What's going to be at the office that you don't have at home? Right now you can sit in your pajamas on your sofa and, how are you going to create that? Well, what we know, and what you hit on is that culture. And so you need that people, you need that connection. And that's the one big draw. But what's the other spaces and what's the other uses of that space that's going to get you from your home? So that's really, I think, where we're seeing the big push is, yep, we know that some people just need that day in, day out collaboration, communication, human contact. But I think the other opportunity that we're seeing right now is businesses recreating their space that can support, like you said, that community and culture. Different space.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of people really anxious to get back to the office. They're not, maybe they're enjoying some of the benefits of working from home and some of the challenges, the new challenges that are presented. And the culture is really important, but a lot of that is around employee well-being too, which is harder to help with when your workforce is completely distributed. Employers don't have control over the type of environments that their workers are in now.
Right.
So Jennifer, I know Hayworth's Global Design and Research team has a framework called Affordances, and that really supports the cognitive, physical, and emotional needs of people. And it really looks at subtle differences in space design, which all of us as trained, interior designers recognize that those small decisions in the space can have a big impact for people, and really can help increase productivity as well. So have you seen these affordances starting to be applied within the new office protocols?
Yeah, thanks, Megan. Hayworth, with our return to work kind of point of view, we really identified three parts of the process of evaluating returning to work, which, we've already touched on, Deanna and Roz kind of touched on too, is that, that piece of employee well-being and understanding the readiness of people, surveying people to be able to come back to work. But then the second piece is really, speaks to the organization's culture and sort of understanding who needs to return to the office rather. But when you speak of affordances, it's really around understanding what modifications might need to be made to the overall floor plate or individual workspaces. And so we use this framework called affordances to really identify the characteristics of your space that encourage certain behaviors in the work environment. And when they're really applied effectively, they can help create the conditions that support well-being, allow people to do their best work, and really enhance that overall employee experience. What's challenging is now when people return to the office, it's going to look very different, right? So there's going to be more separation, probably added stress of people, understanding the guidelines around how you navigate the space. So it's even more important that we really ensure that employees have spaces and tools to allow them to safely kind of work at their best throughout the office. And so there's a number of affordances within that framework that you spoke of. But when adjusting the workspace for physical distancing, we've really identified a few key affordances that we have shown that relieve stress and provide that security that we found should really be prioritized within the work environment. So I'm just going to hit on a couple, but when you talk about cognitive needs, we identify that affordance of insulation, or that ability to focus and filter out distractions, which I think could even be more challenging due to the increased stress levels. And many people, have become accustomed to working from home, which could either be, I guess, less or more distracting at home. But I think just our mental processing capabilities have really changed. And so to be able to provide people access to phone rooms and enclaves and personal seats and areas away from their individual workspace, that are going to need to be monitored and cleaned, differently and identified when they're ready for use. But I think they're still important to have available. And then secondly, when you think about emotional needs or the well-being of employees, thinking about it in the context of employees' personal control and safety. We feel really out of control right now with everything going on. And so just putting additional emphasis on that in the new work environment. So depending on, your configuration of your workstations, for example, maybe we need to add screens or create some sort of sense of security and separation, and just sort of those subtle cues to people to maintain those social distancing protocols. And then another one from emotional standpoint, I think, is this idea of affordance of affinity, which is that feeling of connectedness, which you touched on. Of the main reason people want to come back into the office is they want to see people and they want to be able to collaborate. So how can we, change those open collaboration areas and meeting rooms so that there's less furniture in them, there's some cleaning protocols, and there's communication out about how those areas can be used. But from a more tactical standpoint, just providing more flexible furniture, whether it's movable tables or lounge pieces that can be moved apart, movable screens, that will all maybe give people, employees, that sense of control over their environment and support engagement and kind of rebuild that community when people are coming back. And then lastly, I think just this idea of physical affordances of being able to move, the idea of movement throughout the day. We've all been quarantined at home, and the most movement we're getting throughout the day is moving from our desk to the kitchen to go get lunch and back. And so now when you're in the office, you're back at your height adjustable table. Are people still comfortable to use that? Does there need to be some sort of barrier that if people are seated on the other side, they just still feel like they've got some sense of security and separation? So I think some people are even staggering those types of tables just so that there's, again, a little bit more separation, but just providing spaces to change postures throughout the day and still have those areas for people to use, I think will be really important. And like you said, Megan, addressing just employee well-being in a more holistic way, cognitively, physically, and emotionally, I think will be so important when we come back into the new office space.
Yeah, it's like we'll need a whole new onboarding process
Right.
for how to teach people new ways of coming together. And the challenge there is, as people are returning, in staggered shifts, as you've mentioned, Deanne, too, that you're going to continue to have part of your staff maybe at home, part of your staff in the office, and that's going to change. And then recognizing everyone's different perspective on this. It's sort of like mask wearing, right? Some people don't leave their house without one and others refuse to put it on. And you're going to have all of those people in your space trying to accommodate them. So, Deanne, maybe you can talk a little bit about your Spark program, because I know in that it really has a lot of assessment tools to help companies look at how should they return to work, and it looks at potential circulation patterns, touch-free enhancements, capacity planning. So are you having clients returning to the workplace already? And if so, when and how? How is that program helping them?
Yeah. So so Spark, and actually how Spark all came about was really on the heels of doing a lot of our surveying. And what we were finding from clients. And in talking with clients, we were hearing they were coming to us. What should we do? We don't know what to do. We're doing the survey. We're finding out this information. Now what? So that's really how Spark evolved. And Spark stands for Space Planning and Assessment in Response to COVID. And we have two platforms on kind of the workplace side where we're working directly with end users, and we also have it on the landlord side where we're helping buildings and do some assessments around the common area. And what that toolkit does, if we have clients, there's so many levels and different tiers to the Spark platform. Some clients come to us and they don't know what to do, and they're really coming to us to help them discover and solve and plan. And then that's where we look at what we can certainly help solve problems, but in the realm of COVID-19, we are not experts, medical experts, and it's really about discovering what protocols they want to follow, what guidelines are they referring to, if it's the CDC or other. And then that's where those design solutions can help respond to those protocols. So part of Spark, we have a workbook where we'll walk through with the client, and it's kind of coupled by maybe we start with the survey and then move to the workbook to help discover. And from there, there's different levels, kind of we're helping them with planning diagrams. We're helping with the day in the life experience journeys. You know, there's a lot of anxiety around all of this that we're just living with day to day. And the element of the unknown, even looking ahead to September or October or year end, none of us really know exactly where this is all going. So having a sense of communication and knowledge. So for the immediate return, to answer your question, yes, we do have clients that have already returned. They returned mid-June, so they're like a week into it. It's a financial client that we've worked with, and they're already back in a phased approach. And we did some we're calling them social distancing planning diagrams, but it's a communication tool that they sent out to all of their staff well in advance to say, how are you commuting to work? Oh, you're taking Metro Transit. Here's how you navigate when you leave that touch point and enter the building and enter the elevator lobby and enter the elevator and enter your tenant space. We're walking them through that entire journey so they understand what they're walking into with a sense of comfort and safety. And then we have a platform where it's the whole communication tools. If they are implementing, no, we are going to mandate you wear a mask, and you know, here's where the hand sanitizing stations are, and all of this stuff. We're doing a whole platform where we're creating the graphic kit of parts, if you will, environmental graphic kit of parts that help communicate all of that. So that's another element. And then there's some of the larger, more full service components. We're having a lot of clients really start assessing their sustainability and wellness strategies and protocols for their space, and we're really looking at deeper audits than what we've done prior to all of this. Yeah. And then getting into the whole HVAC. We have an engineering division at Nelson, and they've been part of the Spark, really looking at HVAC systems and different lighting options and things like that. So that's how it's all rolled up. We do have some clients coming back from the survey. But a majority, I'd say 73% roughly of who we surveyed have no plans in going back until this fall. Yeah. Nelson included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think especially having school-age children, there's just a lot of uncertainty around that aspect too, that knowing you could put a plan in place and then you're probably going to have to modify it. And that's everything we're dealing with now, right? Your prediction cycles have to be 30, 60, 90 days. It's harder to plan any further out than that. Roz, maybe I'll ask you kind of the same question around your Spark program and your clients returning to work. And I know you have a passion for the sustainable element as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, you know, I think the other thing that we're interestingly enough seeing is maybe a little less of the me, but more or less of the we, but more back to the me, right? We were really, you know, less of my own personal space, more of this shared space. And I think for a couple of things, you know, we were just looking at a plan and it had lockers. And we had a conversation. Are we going to go to a shared space for coats and storage items, or is that going back to the workstation? We looked at another plan. It's a financial group, and they have 6x6 workstations with panels around. And they were kind of nervous about their plan. And we took a look, and it's like, you've got a dream plan as it relates to COVID. You have offices that are private, and, you know, a workstation that has your 6-foot distance circumference around it and no circulation through your space. So I think, like Deanne was talking about, we are kind of identifying certain users that are, I think, going to be hit by this a little bit more. So kind of, how it relates back to the sustainability part is, we're working with a lot of groups that are returning to the office that have those components. They have the workstation. So are we adding those components? Are we pulling them off the work, circulation to add circulation around the exterior? So we really are trying to be cognizant with, not just starting over and throwing our hands up in the air and saying we have to redo everything, right? I think the other thing that we have been seeing and a little bit more difficulty navigating is the conference room, right? Even an 8 to 10 person conference room, you can get 2 seats in there if you're lucky. So that I think is really kind of the two that we're seeing. What does this me and we space start to look like, and what does this conference room start to look like, and how do we, articulate that? We actually did have a client say, if they wanted to remove every chair, where do we store those chairs? Like, do we take them away? Is that a whole, So talking about sustainability, how do we continue to use what they have? How do we continue to not make a big change, with what they have existing, but give them a space that, now they have the safe feeling they want to be there and they can connect. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's been a lot of talk around sort of the new normal of getting back to work, getting back to normal, and no one really knows exactly how to phrase that, because we know that until there's a vaccine and better drugs to improve mortality and recovery rates, that all workplaces, and we're really talking about the corporate office, but restaurants, factories, everything, none of it's going to look or feel like it did before. And so we're addressing a lot of these challenges, but there is a real positive side that we have an opportunity to do something amazing here too. So Roz, maybe I'll ask you to just continue on what your thoughts are. How do we move forward in a different way? How are people looking at the role their real estate plays? And we've talked a little bit about that too, the purpose of a physical office.
Right. I was really on an interesting webinar, and it was through Wired Magazine, and it was European, so it was refreshing to get more of a global kind of idea. And one of the first questions they asked is, where do you think business will go? Do you think it'll be led by business? Do you think it'll be led in making money, right? Do you think it'll be led by people first and making money second? Or do you think it'll be a tie right down the middle? And I think it was about 70% where they felt like it would be people first. And then they asked the question, where do you think we are now before, pre-COVID? And it was under 50% that it was, people first. So we are already seeing this real move to people first, right? And what does that mean? We're even seeing that at the conference room table. I know Microsoft is doing interviews, even if both the interviewer and the interviewee are in the same building, they're now going to not sit in the same room and do what we're doing. It takes the hierarchy out of it, right? You don't have the power seat in the conference room, and they feel like they're getting more engaged in real conversation. So kind of hitting back on that conference room, what is that even going to look like? Talking about real estate, are we reducing that real estate? Right now, even with return to the office, if you both are in the same building and you want to have a conversation, we have a lot of clients that are saying, video conference, because we don't have the space right now to support that. Are we going to continue to do that? Maybe, it'd be interesting to see. I think, the other thing that we're really seeing, and it's really interesting, and you guys hit on it before a little bit too, but what is the reason to return? And really what I think, when you put people focused first, it's less activity based. So it's less about, here's my role, here's my position, here's what I have to do, and I need an office or a workstation, and it needs to be in the corner. It's more about, what do I need as my personal and my personality? And, we have a couple of people in our office that one has a long commute. She's way more productive working at home. And then we have another woman in our office who doesn't have children, doesn't even have a pet, and she's dying to get back in the office. And it's really, if you look at it, it's personality. One can focus more. The other can't focus unless she's with her people. She likes the communication. She likes just to throw ideas back and forth. And I really think that that office is going to, of the future, support that, and so really giving people the choice, the options. Again, we can ideate all day long on what that potentially look like, but those are the two things that I think is really going to be people focused and not the ordinary activity based hierarchy approach. It's really going to be based on personality, wants, needs, and desires.
Yeah, I think that you touched a little bit on just thinking differently about people's performance too, when it gets to their individual personalities and their roles and what works for them, if they're more productive at home or in the office. And that might be role based, but it might just be personality style as well. And I think we hopefully will see more of a shift away from, I can see you in your chair, I've counted the hours you're here, you've checked the box, here's your paycheck, to you have this particular task, activity, project to complete. It's completed, and it's more on those outcomes, and outcomes tied to purpose too. So people feel like they have meaning in their work.
Yep.
So I know, Jen, the local Hayworth employees, we share office space at Fluid, and you're often out with customers and sometimes working from home. So you've already kind of had a mix prior to this. What kind of responses are you hearing from companies as they think about continuing that remote work, delaying the return to the workplace, and just how they're sort of analyzing performance and outcomes?
Yeah, I have been really fortunate because I've since I started with Hayworth 4 years ago, I've had a great kind of office set up at home, right, with my ergonomic task chair and my height adjustable table and monitor arms. And but many companies that I speak to, they sent all their employees home in March and had no idea sort of what their work from home space looked like. And so you had many people probably just sitting at their dining room table in an uncomfortable chair or hunched over their laptop on their sofa for 8, 10, 12 hours a day. And now that a lot of organizations are realizing that, this is maybe a longer term solution for all of their employees. And so they're identifying the need to really provide resources and ergonomic tools to create a more productive home office setup. And a lot of clients I'm talking to are realizing that, having their employees working from home for an extended period of time is a potential liability. And so they're actually, maybe you've heard this, but Google, I know for one, and many other companies are as well, are providing employees with a stipend to use towards home office equipment and furniture in order to allow their employees to create a more comfortable, ergonomic home office environment. And so the other thing I think is we're also seeing, larger Fortune 500 and 100 companies starting to reorganize and identify, departments that could permanently work from home and offload that real estate from their portfolio. So, if you have it's interesting, it'll see what happens, but if you have a certain percentage of your workforce that's going to be permanently working from home, and companies are downsizing and kind of reallocating that real estate, it makes you wonder, what that office space that they are going to keep, what is that going to look like, and how is it going to function? It could look very different than it does today and serve a different purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've heard stories of people taking their desk chair from the office and bringing it home. And then you laugh, you're like, well, what happens when you have to go back also? And now you're like, got to haul your chair with you or what? So I think when you're sort of permanently here working from home, but when you get to a point that you might be doing both, having that home office setup is going to be much more crucial. So, and I think having that choice, I know personally for me, it's nice to be able to say, based on what I have to accomplish today, am I better to start my day working from home or from the office, and to give people that flexibility. And that may not have been seen as an option for a lot of people or roles before, but I think more now people are going to sort of expect and demand that as well. So, So taking a look at within your tenant space, you have a lot of control over who comes into your space, how they interact with your space, be it employees or visitors. But generally, tenants are part of larger buildings where there's shared spaces, and we know that amenities such as fitness centers, rooftop decks, lounges have all been on the rise. And that really is relying on the landlord to take care of the safety there. So, Deanne, I know IDS, AT&T Tower are some newly built out amenity spaces. How are they supporting tenants as they start to think about returning to work or if they return? And then also, what's the impact been on spec suites?
Yeah. Well, answer your question first about the amenity spaces, common areas, and certainly AT&T was one that we collaborated with together. And that one, they are not closing down the amenities. So we have an amenity lounge on the 6th floor and 7th floor that is shared among a variety of spec suite users. 6th floor is fully leased, and they are going to leave that amenity lounge open and really leave it up to the tenants and using their judgment and sort of self-policing it, if you will, to their comfort level. Now, down in the lobby, with a lot of, you look at the investments these asset owners have made to engage and activate and build community and all these come together places with a significant investment. And that investment has paid off because prior to COVID, that's what everybody wanted. And that was kind of the life and energy of these buildings, right? For AT&T, they have opted to leave those spaces open the way it is designed, and this was very intentional. Roz and I worked on the project to design it with a lot of choice and option and variety built in. So it's inherent that you have a lot of choice and options, and just with a few little tweaks of maybe moving some things out, you can easily use that space while still maintaining some proper distances that people want to follow. So that's what AT&T is doing. Some other Class A trophy buildings in the CBD that we work in have also invested in spec suites, building common areas, etc. We did a beautiful tenant amenity lounge on the 41st floor of IDS. And that one they're actually closing, and it is not going to open for the foreseeable future. Not right now, anyways. Once watching what the state and the government is doing as things might lift with the quantities and some of the mandates and how people are using the space, they'll reassess it. But if spaces like that get reopened in that particular property, it's kind of maybe starting with the conference center first, but things like fitness and like that amenity lounge in some buildings, they're opting to close it. That's here in this market. Looking holistically at the market on the West Coast, Northeast, and Southeast, it has been more of a common theme that landlords are opting for the immediate return to keep some of those spaces closed. Just refrain from use, and there's no logistics liability. It's just kind of just keeping them closed. Now, that can have a ripple effect, because think about these tenants that have opted to go into these buildings, and they didn't create those spaces in their leasable area because they're relying on some of these amenities from the building. So it is this balancing act, and it's just going to be very interesting to see as things evolve, and we're watching it closely and really listening, learning, observing. And I think with all of this, going in it with a mindset of empathy and a mindset of flexibility. We need to shift gears and shift. And going back to that Spark program with the landlords, as we look at some of these amenity spaces, even if they're closed, we're doing Spark. And right now, they're not quick to execute maybe anything right yet, but they have maybe 3 or 4 different scenarios planned and ready to go. So when they do need to make a decision, they have options ready to respond.
Yeah. Well, I think as we touched on, schools not knowing what's going there, there's just a lot of uncertainty in the future. And even as people start to return to the workplace, maybe this fall or in January of 2021, we'll just have to be ready to respond and maybe be back where we are today. No one really knows what that is. And certainly a lot of pressure on building managers to up their cleaning protocols and engage with, technology and things that maybe didn't have to be at the forefront. Now they really have a responsibility to do that, and some will probably be better prepared than others to navigate that.
I was just going to mention too, with the landlord side, we've been working a lot with a lot of, prop tech options. So a lot of different softwares and apps where if you need to order lunch, it's app-based, where the pickup location is, so they don't have to navigate through the entire, building to get to that suite. Along with those prop tech sort of software systems, if you need to pay for parking, open up your tenant suite, it's moving into some of those touch-free solutions. So that's being highly assessed right now with a lot of clients that we're working with. So just want to mention that.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That's really good to know. And I think, as you guys have touched on sort of the energy of spaces too. I mean, I've been downtown in our office a time or two, and it's very quiet downtown. It's unusual. So, and there's not a lot of places to get anything to eat or have any of that energy. You really have to bring it with. And even in the office, there's, 2 other people there that you're not even sure if anyone's in the office when you come in. So it's a very different feeling right now. Well, I want to make sure we have time for some questions too. I'm going to go ahead and just check the chat box and see what we've got here. So maybe the first one here revolves around collaboration and how we see in-person collaboration taking place as we assist clients moving back in. And we know that that's been kind of all the rage outside of the open office as a dead or alive. It was collaboration. So I don't know, Dee or Roz, Jen, anyone want to sort of tackle that first?
I can kind of hit on a little bit. That's been, when we're doing the return to office plans, the most difficult piece, right? Most conference rooms, you have a one way of circulation and there's minimal, you're for sure walking through somebody's 6-foot bubble when they're sitting in their chair, right? So maybe a 10 to 12 person conference room, we are getting 2 seats. So what does that look like? I think the collaboration is going to still be a big part of the new, how we want to work, right? That's what's kind of, as we joked, getting off of our couches and out of our PJs and into the office. What is the draw? And I think collaboration is going to be a big part of that. I think, and maybe this is hopeful and with all of the Zoom meetings, but hopefully we're going to be, more open air, more quick turnaround, 10 minutes stand up. What do we need to accomplish? And then a break versus, the conference room sitting down, more formal, and we kind of hit on that before too, no power seat. So, from the research that we've done, I think we'll still collaborate, but it'll look different and it'll hopefully be more open and quicker.
Yeah, I love that idea. Dee, I think you're on mute here, but feel free to jump in and add a little bit to that. You're still muted. I think that the taking of breaks as well, and I know with all of the Zoom meetings that we've had going on, that you get that back to back to back, and it's really easy to just schedule those because you're like, oh, there's no commute time. People can just be on all these meetings, and realistically, you still need to use the restroom, and even more so now, I think, take that mental break, the fatigue of looking at the screen all the time.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, yeah. Now I can hear you, Dee.
Okay. So sorry about this. Leave it to the technology here, right? This is called, just adaptability and flexibility.
Love it.
I just wanted to comment on the collaboration piece. With that, we've done some surveys about going back to work, and it kind of ties into workplace culture. And I know Roz hit on culture at the beginning of the discussion. But one of the outcomes we have found from the surveys that we've done, surveying roughly 2,000 respondents responded to it, but everything's going to have much more meaning and purpose. So the way we're collaborating, it's not only the how, but it's the why that perhaps is going to change with that, which then how we're doing it may change and the environment may change. That rolls up to the why. So I was just going to comment on meaningful collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's great to to bring in the results from your survey too, and really be able to pull across the country what resources you're getting. I do see another one here talking about, a lot of what we've mentioned today is short term, sort of getting immediately more into the physical workplace. And I know we don't have a crystal ball, but trying to look forward to this phased approach of like, what does it look like in a year or 3 years? What are you seeing? I don't know, Roz, if you want to take sort of what's a point of view on the future?
Yeah. We had a conversation not too long ago, and it was internally, and somebody had made a comment. Well, I think it'll just kind of go back. And I said, yeah, in a lot of cases that, there's a situation that does. And I said, one that comes to mind is 9/11. And if you were around, at that point, I remember the first time, I went through an X-ray machine. I thought, well, we can't do this every time. We're going to be late for every flight. And then we had to take the shoes off, and then we had to get rid of the liquids. And, now, my 17-year-old doesn't think anything of it. That's just what she knows. And, just doing a little reading, there's a new strain, and it's kind of related to the swine flu in China. And so, not only have we not, kind of rectified where we are right now with COVID, but now there's another. And I think because we've gone through this, we're going to be much more proactive and concerned, and so I don't think it's going to be a total go back to the way it was, but I also don't think it's going to be a big course correction. I don't think we're going to work totally different either. I do think it's, it was such a big push, probably 2006 and 7, maybe even a little bit earlier, less square foot per person. That's all that we, was the metric. How many square feet per person? And I don't think it's going to be wrapped around that as much. I think it's going to be more about, a little more open space. How can I make a choice? How can it be flexible? How can the space continually change? If I'm sitting at a workstation, do I have 4 people feet of to the next workstation, or do I have enough elbow room where I'm not concerned about the person I'm sitting next to? So, like you said, Megan, the crystal ball, not sure, but I do see this new trend kind of coming back to what we've been talking about, people first, which means a little more space, a little more breathing room, and a little more choice.
Yeah, make sure I'm on mute too. I think that when we look at the investment into, the office space, the built environment, there is in that short term, people are trying to make use of what they have, be it furniture products or the walls or the lack of walls in the space. And I'm curious, Jen, as we're looking at that future runway, and Hayworth, as a manufacturer has to develop products, obviously that's a long runway there to get something to market. And I think that a lot of the direction where things were headed before with user control sort of ties right into where this will need to go. Is there anything else on that you think Hayworth has been thinking about differently that would be valuable?
Yeah, I think, what's so interesting in this time where everybody is really pausing, Hayworth, it's kind of amazing if anybody has seen, we have a virtual NeoCon platform since we weren't able to all meet in Chicago, but the amount and number of products that we've actually introduced this year is pretty amazing. And so many of them are sort of built on that idea of long-term flexibility and user control. And so thinking kind of big picture and things that are still continuing to be in development of how do you sort of quickly pivot from having your individual work point to more of a collaborative type of environment. And kind of creating an environment, almost like an architectural environment within an environment. So I think it can nicely make or create some of those separations that people are going to be looking for, but then also just provide the employees that opportunity to feel like they have some control as well, and be able to adjust to make the environment what they feel comfortable in. And I think, like, as everybody's been saying, the reason that we probably will be coming into the office, I mean, I think I saw a statistic that 50% of people feel comfortable just continuing to collaborate, virtually, but there's still some of those things that happen around innovation and rapid development, and depending on the organization and the industry and your culture, that I think are still going to have to continue to happen face to face and in the office. But I think, again, it goes back to just what is the organization's culture, what are people comfortable with, and the employee is going to come first throughout all of this. And I think we'll continue to, depending on if we have another situation like this in the future.
Yeah, the virtual whiteboards and shared documents are great, but they're not quite the same as being together and having that tactile experience too. One other question that came in is, do we anticipate any new roles or teams created at a company as a result of this repercussions, maybe facilities or HR related? And I think a lot of companies are experiencing that with their preparedness plans and their return to workplaces. Who's navigating and managing all this, even the simple things of having enough masks and hand sanitizer, and then sort of monitoring people coming in? Has anyone seen some particular roles come out of this, or is it just someone wearing more than one hat?
Well, I think, yeah, definitely the intersection of like legal, when we kind of look at the here and now, and there's probably going to be different evolutions on how teams are formulated or who's brought to the table, but certainly right now between human resources and legal, they're much more integrated. Even as we as a design firm are preparing our reentry into the workplace, it's not just a group of architects and designers thinking it through. It's very much HR is involved, legal's involved. There's the whole cultural component, but definitely we've been doing some, assessments and fact-finding, information gathering around teaming, and we do think that post-COVID, kind of moving into extreme teaming is going to be a theme or a trend. Teaming like you've never maybe teamed before, and then thinking even our industry. Are we bringing more sociologists to the table, anthropologists? Looking at the whole human psychology to all of this. There's obviously safety, emotional well-being. I mean, there's so many things. So as we're looking to design spaces, as opposed to getting a lighting designer, interior designer, architect, engineer, your typical team, we do feel that there's going to be much more of a consultative sort of approach to teaming and bringing people in at different points of the project and a much more broader spectrum is, things that we've talked about.
Yeah, I think that interdisciplinary approach to design definitely has a ways to go, where we're getting more of that integrated project team. But if you look at even what's happening just in current events around policing, and the idea that you need people with different perspectives, different skill sets to address what you thought was a project that maybe just an architect owned, and in reality, you could have a lot of different influences there that would just make for a more successful outcome overall. So I think the last question I see off to the side kind of relates to that, is just with the variation in people's comfort level. We touched on, some people won't leave their house without the mask and others refuse to wear it. So is there conflict that you're hearing from the customers who are going back into the physical workplace, getting people to adhere to those guidelines? What's the protocol? And I think, you can approach it as, we're all here in this together, but in reality, if someone in the office is pulling a chair into the conference room and they're not supposed to, have you heard any clients having to address that yet?
Maybe not to that length. I think, what we're really working with, and Dee hit on our spark as well, is, giving everybody the information so they can make the right choices. And so, when we're working on a plan with a group, we're showing them the path of travel and the distance to go around. We have environmental graphics that, we can apply in all those areas, just as that little friendly reminder, is your mask on, and I think we're almost trying to mitigate those damages instead of waiting for it to happen. We're doing the gentle nudges, the gentle reminders. I think the other thing that we have heard a little bit is, from our clients, how do we, how it's probably even a worry before it happens. But I think for the most part, everybody has been doing their part. Like you said, there's, I think, a different level of care when it's fellow employees and teammates versus when you're at the grocery store and nobody's following the arrows, right? I think there's a little bit more of onus in that. But I think we've really tried to mitigate that by setting up, the parameters and giving everybody the tools to do the right thing so it's not a question.
Yeah, I like some of the examples I've seen, and I think they were on Nelson's website as well. Just taking a lighthearted approach to some of the safety guidelines, and that it's not, a giant exclamation point. And it's like, oh, that's right, we can have a little humor with this too, and just kind of appreciate that we're all in this strange circumstance together. So, well, before we close, maybe I'll just ask each of you, what's something that you're either most excited about when you get back to your physical workplace, or what you're most hopeful about?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm laughing. Because I've been thinking about this a lot. I am personally excited, one, just to physically be around people, but at Nelson, I cannot wait to get back to the office where we have kind of an all-team social gathering. We're an office that is embedded into the motto. I know it's said a lot, work hard, play hard, but we have work hard, play harder. We love to get together. So I cannot wait to congregate in our kitchen and just be together as a community at the end of the day. Who knows how that will look like when we return. Maybe we can only have 10 people at a time and we do it in rotation, but that's what I'm most excited about, just to be together, physical togetherness. So
I'm really excited about where our future space is going to go and the ideation with the teammates. I love a good problem. So how are we going to solve this? And I always love working with, teammates and that always take it above and beyond. And we have such a great group of outside the box thinkers that I'm really excited to see where we take this. What's our next problem that we have to solve? Because, I think even from when we have been staying home in March till now, there's a new problem each week. Hand sanitizer is totally flammable, so you can only have a certain amount at a certain time. Who would have thought that, right? We're constantly coming up with a new problem to solve. And, I'm excited to ideate with teammates, like Dee said, in real time and probably with a cocktail in our hand. But what can we do to be, pushing this new workplace forward?
Awesome.
Well, for me, I mean, as I said, I've always been used to working remotely, but we have the awesome benefit of being able to work in our Hayworth Lounge within Fluid Studio. And so I can't wait to get back into that space and see not only my Hayworth team within the studio, but all of our awesome partners at Fluid. And then most importantly, just be able to be back, being able to showcase the studio and give tours to clients and get to a point where there's a comfort level. We've had a few, but it's really different giving a tour virtually when you're trying to look at products. So I'm excited for the day when we can all be back together, touching and feeling product and sharing that entire experience at Fluid. So.
Yeah, who knew you'd ever be excited to demo chairs again, testing them.
Right?
So yeah, I'll bring them in. 12 chairs, I got them. Let's go. I want to see people. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for the conversation today. It's really valuable. And of course, it's always nice to spend time with you. And it was a pleasure to be able to sort of prep on this. And it meant we could have several conversations prior to today's that everyone else got to enjoy as well. So I think if anyone on the conversation today has more questions or comments, feel free to reach out and connect with any one of us. And thanks for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Megan.
Bye.
Bye.